How's it going, guys? Randall aka Shizukats here once again on the Tressa's Collectibles channel, and today we're going to be diving into Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. This is going to be the first of two meta deck profiles we're going to be featuring on the channel, starting with today's 8 standby deck profile, and later on also taking a look at the Choice Pants list. Both of these decks have been performing very well in the Japanese version of Weiss Schwarz, and are expected to perform just as well in the English environment, potentially becoming one of the top sets. So, without further ado, let's get right into the deck profile. As usual, let's start with our Climax Combos. Our level 1 combo this time around is very unique among standby decks. Usually at level 1 in 8 standby, you will either see a 1-0 combo, such as Tensura's level 1 Rimuru, or a 1-1 7500 beat stick with Hand Encore, such as Data Live's Kurumi. Mushoku's Eris level 1 gets the best of both worlds, being a 1-1 7500 with Climax combo. The combo itself activates upon playing the standby Climax to the Climax area, when Eris is in the front row. Mill 2, add up the levels of the milled cards and salvage a character whose level is equal or lower than that sum. This is very similar to Shizu level 1 combo from Tensura, with the main difference being the timing. Since Eris's combo is on Climax placement as opposed to being on attack, you can actually mill additional standby targets if you don't already have the ideal target in your waiting room. At level 3, we have the 3-2 Ghislaine. She sits at a modest 9k base power, but has unparalleled offensive might, fitting her status as a Sword King. During your turn, if you have a full board of 6-sided world characters, she gains an additional 5000 power and prevents opponents from using any backups or events during her battle. She also heals when placed on stage from hand, and her Climax combo is a very simple yet effective on attack, pay 2, burn 2. Now onto the level 0s. First up, we have our ideal opening play, 4 copies of the level 0 Rudius. This card has a pair of abilities that we've seen previously in Weiss Schwarz on Armin from Attack on Titan and Emilia in ReZero. Sitting at 1500 base power, Rudy gains 2000 extra power if you have 5 or more hand, bringing him up to a very solid 3500 power. But on top of that, he's also a center runner, meaning that if your opponent wants to answer this card, they'll have to be able to reach 3500 or higher power in multiple lanes, making him extremely annoying to deal with, similar to other fat moving profiles such as Tensura's Millum Chaser. When playing against Mushoku Tensei, you'll want to put your opening character in the center slot when possible. If the Mushoku player wants to deal with your turn 1 play, they'll need to put something in the center, which will block their Rudy runner from running to that center slot, or they'll have to put Rudy himself in the center slot. Next up, we have the level 0 Ruijerd. On play, you can clock a card from hand to search your deck for any 6-sided world character and add it to hand. Compared to a regular Roxy drop searcher, you are taking 1 damage in exchange for not having to pay any stock. This comes with several additional benefits. First of all, you're able to play and use Ruijerd's effects on your very first turn, since it doesn't require any stock. Additionally, you can utilize the extra damage to level yourself up upon reaching 7 cards in clock, which is super important in standby decks as it unlocks an additional level's worth of standby targets. Lastly, the self-damage can actually fix the colors in your clock and allow you to play additional colors that you didn't already have. Additionally, Ruijerd is one of the only green cards in the deck, which is necessary for playing one of our higher level green cards later on. Our next card is a one of Rudius Box Topper PR, a very powerful card when going second. When placed on stage from hand, and the opponent has exactly 1 character in their front row, if that character is a cost 0 character, you can send it straight to waiting room, no questions asked. This is extremely useful against many common turn 1 plays, such as the Rudy center runner that we run ourselves. Additionally, when this Rudy is sent from stage to waiting room, you can pay 2 stock to salvage a character. The reason we only run 1 copy is actually because of the Ruijerd level 0. Going second, if we open Ruijerd, we can use his effect to grab Rudy out of the deck, which means we're effectively running 4 copies of the Rudy to use on our first turn going second. Then, after we attack with both the Ruijerd and the Rudy, we have 2 stock that can then be utilized for Rudy's on-death salvage ability if you so choose. Next up is 2 copies of the Eris level 0. She is a vanilla Fukujiro, with the Fukujiro profile being on death, discard a card to dig up to 4 cards from the top of the deck to grab a level 1 or higher card. This card helps with filtering potential standby targets into your waiting room, either through the discard cost of the ability, or the ability itself milling additional cards. This ability is also able to grab events as well as characters, and we do run a couple events in this deck that can potentially be grabbed off of this effect. Roxy Brainstorm is one of the star cards in Mushoku Tensei. She has a pretty generic yet always effective rest self-salvage brainstorm ability, but the true strength of Roxy lies in her second ability. When you play any Climax, you get to give any of your characters on attack pay 1 twin drive until the end of the turn. This allows you to pay out climaxes as you trigger them, letting you get the benefits of the trigger ability without letting them get stuck in your stock. Additionally, the Twin Drive gives extra chances to trigger even more climaxes, which can be instrumental in constructing large boards using lots of standbys. Having such ready access to Twin Drive is a big part of what makes Mushoku Tensei so strong, and this is definitely a card you'll want to be looking to start your decks with if you have access to it. Next up, we have a few utility 1-ofs. As 1-ofs, they can be a bit harder to draw into naturally, but you can use abilities like the Ruijerd level 0, as well as the Eris Climax combo to grab these cards if the situation calls for it. First up, we have this level 0 Rudy, which is a powerful companion to standby. When placed on stage from hand, he can give 1000 power to one of your other characters until the end of the turn, and when you play a climax, you can bounce him back to your hand to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, rearrange them in any order, and give 1k power to one of your characters again. Rearranging the top 2 is extremely important in standby decks, since you never want to trigger standby on the first attack, and the bounce back cost clears up a slot on board that you can place a standby target in. Overall, this card has extremely good synergy with pretty much everything you want to be doing as a standby deck. Next up is the Lilia level 0. She's mainly used as a removal tool. She can rest herself to choose one of your characters and give it the ability until the end of the turn, where when it reverses its battle opponent, you can send that battle opponent to stock, and the opponent pays out the bottom card of their stock. This is useful for removing sticky characters that have Encore, or preventing the opposing characters from using their on-death abilities, such as Fukujiro. Additionally, Lilia can rest herself and discard an event to salvage a character. As we run events that search from the deck, this second ability can sometimes come in handy if you want waiting room access instead. In addition to our 3 copies of the Roxy Brainstorm, we have 1 copy of the Guild Receptionist Spammable Brainstorm. Her Brainstorm ability lets you search a character and discard a card for each climax hit, letting you quickly go through the deck if needed. She also lets you draw 1, discard 1 on play if you have 2 or more other characters, potentially letting you filter an unneeded card out of your hand, and maybe even getting a good standby target into your waiting room. She's also one last green card that we can potentially level to get green. Our last level 0 is 2 copies of the Roxy Event Bonder. On play, you can discard a card to salvage the Migurd Amulet event from your waiting room, and additionally on play, you get to peek at the top and bottom cards of your opponent's deck. The Migurd Amulet is a very powerful and efficient hand-fixing tool, letting you search your deck for any 6-sided world character, add it to hand, discard a card, and then send the event itself to memory. This is a -1 in card advantage overall, but while the event is in memory, if you level up, you can send the event back to your waiting room to search your deck again, thus converting it into a 2-for-2, all while costing 0 stock. The second search being delayed is actually really nice as it allows you to adapt to the changing situations of the game. The amulet does require a Roxy on stage to play, but the event bonder itself is a Roxy, making it very easy to use. And even if you don't use the bonder, you always have the Roxy Brainstorm as a Roxy name as well. Also remember that if you use the amulet while already at level 3, you can't get the benefit of the second half of the effect, since leveling up at that point just means that you lost the game outright. But you can circumvent this by discarding the amulet for Lilia's effect instead of using the amulet itself. For our non-combo level 1 characters, we first have 2 copies of the Ghislaine Accelerate. She gains 500 power for each of our other characters continuously, reaching a respectable 6k power, and has an Accelerate ability. At the start of your climax phase, you can clock the top card of your deck as cost, and until the end of the turn, Ghislaine gains an additional 1000 power and an extra ability. When she reverses her opponent, you can look at up to 4 cards from the top of your deck, choose up to 1 character from among them, add it to hand, and send the rest to waiting room. This is an extremely powerful card to bring out via standby at level 0, similar to the Lisbeth level 1 Accelerate from Sword Art Online. When you bring her out at level 0, she has a very easy time farming opposing level 0s to get free cards, and similar to the Ruijerd level 0, the Accelerate and clocking yourself can push you up a level, unlocking higher level standby targets. Finishing out the level 1 line, we have 1 copy of the Roxy Backup. She's just a standard 2k backup, but can be very helpful in protecting your board, and can easily be picked up via Eris's Climax combo. Moving on to our level 2s, we have 4 standby targets, 3 copies of the 2-2 Ghislaine, and 1 copy of the 2-2 Eris. The Eris is a pretty run-of-the-mill 2-2 10k hand encore, and is a useful option to have if you identify that your opponent's deck may be able to address your standby board, and you think the encore will come in handy. Otherwise, the 2-2 Ghislaine is your go-to standby target. She's another very unique card that serves dual roles, similar to the 1-1 Eris, being a big beatstick and global 1k support at the same time. Her own stat line caps out at 9k if you have 2 characters in the back row, which isn't super high by standby 2-2 standards, but she really starts to shine when you can field 2 or more of her at the same time, allowing them to buff each other while also giving big buffs to everything else on your board. When you standby out your first Ghislaine at level 1, she boosts your Eris combos to 8500, which can be pretty difficult for some decks to deal with. Next up, we have 2 counters, one Ghislaine anti-change counter and one Rudy rest counter. The Ghislaine is just a nice option to have, and being in the deck forces the opponent to respect the possibility that we might have the card in hand to use against their early plays. On the other hand, the Rudy rest counter can make or break games, making our opponent lose offensive pressure by resting their characters before they have a chance to attack. Of course, this counter does require you to have firm control of the board in order to maximize its usefulness, but this can be accomplished either by having a huge board full of standby characters and forcing the opponent to crash their lanes, or by using the Ghislaine level 3 combo to smash through the opponent's board. Finally, let's take a look at our level 3s. We have 2 copies of Paul and 2 copies of Roxy, both cards that give additional power to the other cards on your board. Paul gives 1500 power to all of your characters, including himself, as long as he's in the front row. He also inherently has Twin Drive and a very interesting third effect. During his battle, when damage taken is cancelled, mandatory mill 1, and if the milled card has a soul trigger, you can discard a card as cost to deal damage to your opponent equal to the amount of damage that got cancelled. So for example, let's say your opponent is attacking you for 2, and you cancel the attack. You mill a soul trigger and then discard a card and then deal 2 damage back to your opponent. It's a pretty rude effect. That being said, the effect is fairly niche and we're mainly using Paul for his field-wide boost, but it's an ability that your opponent has to avoid being careless around. The Roxy is a 2k assist, and can draw 2, discard 1 when placed on stage from hand. A lot of the time, you're going to be standbying her out and won't get to utilize this draw 2, ditch 1 effect, but sometimes it can be very useful to dig for the last piece you need, such as your Ghislaine Climax. She also has a third effect. When your character triggers a climax, you can choose one of your characters and give it Twin Drive and 1000 power until the end of the turn, letting you pay out triggers on the fly similarly to the Twin Drive granted by the Roxy Brainstorm. Between the two, I typically advocate for bringing out a Roxy first, since Paul's base power is quite low. With just one Paul and one Ghislaine, his power level is just at 11k power, which is not too hard to get over, but if you prioritize Roxy first and then bring out Paul, he's at a much more respectable 13k. Finally, to round out our level 3 line, we have our one of Sylphiette Stock Swap, the lone green card outside of the level 0 line. Stock Swap is a very important profile to run if you have it available in your set, as it allows you to avoid getting locked out of the game when your opponent's compression is getting way out of hand. For the Mulligan, cards you pretty much always want to prioritize are your level 0 Rudy Runner, Ruijerd Searcher, and Standby Climaxes. Mulliganing your level 1s can be a bit finicky and depends on how many standbys you draw. You pretty much always want to hold your Eris Climax to use at level 1, and any additional standbys can be used at level 0 to bring out level 1 characters early. However, if you don't open any additional standbys, it can be better to hold on to your important level 1 characters in hand so that you can still hard play them when you hit level 1. For color priority, you'll pretty much always want to prioritize red for your level 1s and standby climaxes, and then blue afterwards for your Roxy amulets, as well as the possibility of hard playing level 3 Roxy from your hand to use the draw 2 discard 1 effect. Lastly, I prioritize green for the Sylphie Stock Swap. Paul is typically only brought out via standby climaxes, so I don't typically look to level yellow, but if the game state doesn't look like you'll need the stock swap, or if you just didn't get green, you can level yellow instead. At level 0, the game plan is fairly simple. Use Rudy Runner to maintain advantage going first, Rudy PR to sabotage your opponent going second, and if possible, standby out your powerful level 1s to take control from an early stage. At level 1, use your Eris combos and Ghislaine 1-0s to get extra cards and mill through the deck, while standbying out Ghislaine 2-2s to bolster the board with the global 1k boost. On follow-up turns, you can push Ghislaine from the back row to the front row to also use her as a 2-2 attacker. When resolving your level 1 Eris combo with the level 0 Rudius, you're going to want to resolve your abilities in a specific order. Upon placing the standby climax, 3 different abilities will all proc simultaneously: Eris 1-1, Rudius level 0, and the standby climax itself, and you can resolve them in the order of your choosing. You do not want to resolve Rudius before Eris, because Rudy's effect will rearrange the top 2 cards of your deck, which you want to do at the very end after all of your Eris mills are done. So, you'll want to resolve Eris first, milling 2 and salvaging, and then resolve Rudy, bouncing back to hand to rearrange the top 2 and give 1k, and then finally resolve the standby climax, bringing out a character to the now empty slot where the Rudy previously was. At level 2, you gain the ability to standby out the Roxy and Paul level 3s. As mentioned earlier, I personally prioritize bringing out the Roxy first as Paul's base power is quite low, and I'd prefer to have additional support before bringing him out. Finally, at level 3, use Ghislaine's finisher combo to take out your opponent. If you think your opponent isn't in a position where you can successfully kill them using the combo, consider holding off on the combo for a turn, instead wiping their board with your powerful Ghislaine attackers, using Rudius rest counter to survive, and going for combo on the following turn. The strengths and weaknesses of this deck kind of go hand in hand. This deck gets the best of both worlds between a 1k1 deck and standby deck, having access to the 1-1 Eris combo's advantage and milling power, as well as the on-field power that you typically see from standby decks. However, although this deck can get above average power levels at level 1 due to the Eris and Ghislaine combination, it suffers a bit against opposing standby decks and early play boards, with Ghislaine 2-2 power lines being below average unless you're able to field multiple copies, and other cards like Paul also being on the weaker side as well don't help the deck much in that department. Ideally, you want to be able to standby out a lot of powerful cards, and the extra trigger checks from cards like the level 0 Roxy Brainstorm will help in achieving that goal, but sometimes you will just low roll and your board can end up being fairly underwhelming. That's all we have for this deck profile, so hope you all enjoyed. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. Stay tuned for our upcoming gameplay videos with this deck, as well as our second deck profile featuring the Choice Pants variant, which will be following the 8 standby gameplay. Until next time, this has been Randall, aka Shizakats, on the Tressa's Collectibles channel, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye!